This video is made possible by Practical Defense Systems, the best online security training at the lowest prices. You can start your security career today online at pdsclasses.com. Check them out. Hi, this is Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I really do appreciate it. As you are probably aware, we've had a number of 2A victories lately, and unfortunately, some 2A defeats. If you're in California, obviously you're aware of the fact that we had Freedom Day or afternoon or whatever it was, where Judge Benitez kind of threw out, sort of, or at least he put a stop to the California ammo restrictions, and then he was asked to later put a stay on his own decision, and he said no. But the infamous Ninth Circuit, the nutty Ninth, the kangaroo court, obviously did us in, and we're back where we started from. So we had, hopefully you got to order some ammo before that happened. Now, Sam Paredes is going to come on and talk about that in a moment. And then today, New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York was finally spoken about by the Supreme Court, and unfortunately they found it moot, but there may be some silver linings in that cloud after all, and he will talk about that as well. And then we just get ready to do this, and guess what? I looked at the news, and it looks like Virginia has had a victory out there with regard to ranges. So with all of that, I have Sam Paredes with me, who is my dear friend and fellow fighter of the Second Amendment. Sam, thank you very much for joining us. What can you tell us about all of that stuff?
Joel, first of all, it's always an honor and a pleasure to be with you. But I want to start out with this. It is never going to be easy for us to win. It is always going to be hard. And the last few days are a case in point. Let's start with the Benitez case on Rody versus Becerra. So Justice Benitez issues an amazing 120-page ruling declaring California's ammunition scheme as unconstitutional. Why? Because, as he pointed out correctly, there are over 110,000 people in the state of California that are eligible, law-abiding citizens, to buy ammunition who cannot. They cannot do it by any procedure that the government has established. And out of the over 600,000 or the hundreds of thousands of background checks that have been conducted, the state can only account for a couple of hundred instances where prohibited people attempted to buy ammunition and were prohibited. So the judge kind of said, you know, the balances are way off. You're catching a handful of criminals who, if they didn't get their ammunition here, would get it through illicit means because, by definition, they are criminals. But you are absolutely trampling on the Second Amendment rights of over 100,000 law-abiding citizens in the state of California, and that is totally unacceptable. Anybody who wants to can go to our website at gunownersca.com. We're posting that ruling on one of our news articles. It's amazing. No wonder it took him so long to come up with this decision. We were hoping for it back in November of last year. He absolutely blistered the state of California and the Department of Justice for all of their inadequacies, for all of their inequities, for their attitude, for the actual numbers that they have been generating, and issued this emphatic ruling that the experiment has been attempted, and basically it's an abysmal failure. So that was beautiful. Well, the Attorney General, being who he is, threw a hissy fit, and then, from my perspective, threatened Judge Benito and went to him and said, if you don't issue a stay on your ruling, because the preliminary injunction went into effect immediately. So Attorney General Becerra went to him and said, if you don't issue a stay on your ruling by 3 o'clock today, that will be last Friday, I'm going to go to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and get them to issue the stay. So in true form, Judge Benitez responded to Attorney General Becerra and just handed him his rear end in a basket. I mean, he kicked his language so far. up the body that it started to scratch the brain. It was awesome. He was going to say, not only no, but heck no, I'm not going to stay your grossly unconstitutional law and how the rights of Californians are being affected. So that went up there. So, on Friday afternoon, Becerra appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and asked for an emergency stay of the injunction. So everybody, immediately the court issued a stay. And everybody says, oh, we lost. But actually, we didn't lose. Every month, the court has a couple of judges that are assigned to review stay requests from anywhere within the circuit. In this case, those that were sitting on the panel were 2 Obama judges and 1 Trump judge. And the ones that reviewed this request was an Obama judge and a Trump judge, although the Trump judge was Judge Mark Bennett from Hawaii, who is not a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. But they issued the stay with the stipulation that this emergency stay is there until we review the request, the appeal from the Attorney General, and basically the ruling from the judge. They still have the ability to say, okay, we're going to leave the stay in place until the actual trial takes place before Justice Benitez and he issues his final ruling, or we're going to lift the stay and allow the injunction that was issued by Judge Benitez to stand as law, and we'll open up all of the ammunition markets.
Okay, so this
the tortured process.
Forgive me because you're talking about a tortured process, and you're right. All right, so now I have a headache. I didn't have a minute ago. Okay, so let me make sure. As you know, not only am I not an attorney, I don't play one on YouTube, and I'm not even close to one. So you're actually kind of more of a legal buff than I am. So explain it to me, and let me make sure I get it. I'm going to read it back to you. And if you're watching this and you're tired of me reading things back, I get it. But, I got to talk this through and make sure I make sense. Judge Benitez had the case before him as to whether the law itself, Kim Rhode had sued along with others because they said the ammo laws are unconstitutional. That court was before Judge Benitez, and for all intents and purposes, it still is, maybe. Have I gotten it right so far? Okay. Yeah,
except that there were 2 parts of that case. One was the challenge, and the other one was the request for a temporary injunction for him to issue it because the rights were so egregiously infringed. So what this part was about the injunction.
I see. So he didn't actually rule on So he didn't really rule on the constitutionality of the law. What he ruled on was whether Kim Rhode et al. Had a good chance of winning, and since they had a good chance of winning, he didn't want their rights and the rights of Californians to be abused in the interim while he was actually hearing the case. Did I get that right?
You get your legal beagle badge for the day. That is what happened.
Star for my forehead. Okay, so
there you go.
all that has happened is that there was an injunction requested to put a stop to the enforcement of the law while the case is being heard, and that is what Judge Benitez ruled on, not the case itself. Okay, so now that I got that, I'm sorry, I was really getting confused. Explain to me again, where are we now based upon what's happened with Judge Benitez finding in favor of the temporary injunction, and then the 3-judge rotating justices that are there for emergency stays putting a stay on his decision with regard to the injunction. Where does that leave us?
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's right. So he issued his ruling on the temporary injunction and said that it is absolutely necessary because the plaintiffs have a high probability of succeeding. The rights that are being abridged are irreparable. And there are a couple of other legal points that qualify. And according to Benitez, the plaintiffs qualified on all those points. That's why he issued the stay. So Becerra, the AG, threw his temper tantrum. He appealed it to the Ninth. The Ninth issued an administrative stay on Judge Benitez's preliminary injunction. In other words, he said, no, the ammo laws have to stay in place while we consider the actual request that was made by the Attorney General, which in essence means they have to read the 120 pages that Judge Benitez wrote in his decision, and then the request that was made by the AG in order to decide whether the injunction should stay in place until the trial is actually held, or if the irreparable damage is actual, in which case they lift the stay and we buy ammunition like normal, as you know, up until the time that the trial takes place.
Okay, so what's actually sitting with that 3-judge panel right now at the Ninth Circuit is not the merits, the constitutional merits of the actual lawsuit, but simply the merits of Judge Benitez's injunction against enforcing the law while the lawsuit proceeds.
And the appeal that was made by the Attorney General asking them to stay the injunction. So they're
okay, I get it.
They're reviewing both those things.
Boy, I think I'm drawing a beat. I'm drawing a beat on it here. Okay, so you're right. So in a sense, we haven't really lost anything, and we haven't really won anything. Because the case in itself, Kim Rohde's case is still Kim Rohde's case, and it is still needs to be adjudicated in some court. Whether that, and I assume. Well, I shouldn't have never assume in this case. I get it. But more than likely, or anyway, it's likely that that's still going to be heard and adjudicated in Judge Benitez's court and then probably appealed as a decision to the Ninth Circuit. In the meantime, we're just bandying about whether the law can be enforced while that court is actually hearing the case. I think I got it.
That is, you got it. Bingo. And, bullseye. It is. That's why I said earlier.
Extra strength coffee is the reason. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Hey, wait a minute. Isn't it happy hour there already?
No, not till Nick gets home. When Nick comes back, we'll sit down and have a beer probably, or I think at that point. Sam, I think I lost your video. I think your phone might have.
Oh, I just got a low battery warning, but I'm good.
Okay, well, I have a personal low battery, but my technology is working. So I'm sorry. So what else can you tell us about that case at the moment?
Well, Judge Benitez's order, his ruling on the injunction, was so detailed and so clear and showed the actual physical numbers of people that are being arrested under this law and the people whose rights cannot be exercised under this law. It is not possible, given the government scheme that has been established, for over 100,000 Californians to buy ammunition legally. And their only option is to buy it illegally, and they don't want to do that. They're law-abiding citizens. So our hope is that the clarity and the completeness of the argument that was made by Judge Benitez will weigh heavily on the judges that are considering the appeal, and they will lift the stay on the injunction and allow us to go back to normal until the trial is held sometime in the future in Judge Benitez's office. Now, you can imagine how he's going to rule, regardless of what it is that is testified in that trial, based on his evaluation so far. He asked for thousands of documents identifying what the situation was. We, Gun Owners of California, work with the California Rifle and Pistol Association and the National Rifle Association. Our part of the deal was to collect horror stories from dealers, pointing out all of the inequities, all of the problems, all of the guffaws, every stumbling block, and then reporting that so that that information could be taken down by the attorneys. They can get affidavits and they can submit them to the judge in order for him to consider how bad the situation was. So this was a massive team effort. Hats off to our leaders in the cause, but it was a team effort where we were able to develop all of this information. That's where we are. We're waiting. Who knows? It could be today. It could be in a couple of days that the appellate panel comes back and says either way. The stay stays. The stay stays. I'm not stuttering. Or the stay is lifted and ammunition can flow freely into the state of California.
Okay, so from a time frame perspective, In the near term, what we're looking for in the next few days or week, it sounds like, or week or two, hopefully long before then, is for the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit essentially, because it was the weekend and an emergency request, it sounds like, put a stay on Judge Benitez's ruling with regard to the injunction briefly, long enough, as you say, for them to actually take a hard look at his ruling and then determine whether there needs to be a permanent stay or whether the temporary stay needs to be removed, and his ruling then goes forward as it is while the case is being heard. So what's the time frame, do you think? I think you just mentioned it, but I just want to be clear. In what time frame do you think the judges at the Ninth Circuit will make a final decision as to whether the stay they put into effect for Judge Benitez's injunction of the law? It sounds like, you make a left and then you make a right. And when you get to the cactus, make sure you jump over the rock. This is just, it's kind of hard to follow unless you got a program. When are they going to make this decision as to whether Judge Benitez's injunction is in effect or is not?
There is absolutely no time frame. There are no deadlines. They do things at their own pace. They set their own schedules and then they break them. And there's no,
Is there a point at which it just becomes, the time frame becomes ridiculous? I mean, if they're sitting on this for a year or 6 months or 3 months to make a simple decision, to make a relatively elementary decision, is there a point at which Kim's attorneys get to start complaining and raising issues with it?
Well, that is something that I would personally not recommend that they do, because the last thing they want to do is tick the judges off so much that they will continue to find excuses as to why not to do it.
So we basically sit down, shut up, and wait, and we hope that it happens sooner rather than later. Are these the same judges that are going to decide this as the ones that put the emergency stay, or is it a separate set of judges that are going to decide?
No, those judges that were who issued the stay are the ones that are in the cycle right now. Who knows if they put it off till Friday and the new judges are appointed to oversee that appeals process? They may do it. I'm not sure what the rule is on that, but they issued the emergency stay, and the probability is that they will be the ones who make a decision, hopefully before their rotation ends.
How often do these judges? This is just a little group of judges that are available for emergency stays, right? How often do they change?
Every month.
Oh, every month.
Every month. Yeah. Every month they select a couple more judges to sit on this, and to consider all of the appeals, so that there's no administrative lag time in appointing a panel and then having them do it. So immediately they just sit there, and if no appeals are made during that month, then they don't have anything to do.
Okay. Well, so now we get to sit down, shut up, and wait, and hope that they rule in Judge Benitez's favor, which would be in our favor and Kim's favor, and then also we're waiting still for the final decision from Judge Benitez's court with regard to the actual case as to whether the ammo laws are constitutional or not. And then that's going to be however long it takes Judge Benitez to do it. And given his habit of writing very detailed, well-thought-out, well-studied opinions, as far as I'm concerned, he can take all the time he needs, because we're going to need a really good opinion. I assume then that what would happen probably with whatever he decides is that's going to be for the California to decide, do they want to appeal it to the Ninth Circuit again or not once he makes that final decision. Is that how that works?
Yes, that's how that will work. And again, if they do that, I expect the Attorney General will be asking the Ninth, as they appeal it, that they issue a stay on the final ruling, because they will be mad that they're being charged with being unconstitutional. So they're going to throw their hissy fit and pound around and say, we lost twice, and we want you to give us a victory by staying the ruling from Judge Benitez. And
then there's always a chance this could go to the Supreme Court at some point, I suppose. But
yes,
I interrupted you. I'm so sorry.
I would hope I would hope that this would go to the Supreme Court, because I think the Supreme Court would kick 100-yard field goal with this thing, and it is so clear cut that I am confident in my heart that the Supreme Court would just jam this down the Attorney General's throat, and it would be a thing of beauty. So. But
I would actually like to be sitting in the courtroom when that happens, if it happens.
That would be wonderful.
There's some other stuff that happened over the last couple of days. Freedom Afternoon. Do we call it actually Freedom Day or just Freedom Afternoon at this point? But we had
we should call it Freedom Day.
Freedom. I wonder now. That's an interesting question, which I know is going to come up. How does it work? I mean, what are the rules if a gun owner, ordered ammo and it shipped, but it hasn't yet arrived prior to the 9th putting in that stay? Does that person still get their ammo?
My guess is that it will work the same way it did with magazines, and this is a total unscientific, unlegal guess, that those people that were in the pipeline and purchased the ammunition, it was now their possession and it was being shipped, that they could receive it. Remember, a lot of people went and ordered magazines and they were delivered after the Freedom Week once they came, because those magazines were at that point their property. So I would guess, but I don't think there are any sets of written rules on this. I think it depends on how mean and nasty the Attorney General wants to get. And how much we want to fight him when he gets mean and nasty. And I vote for letting the junkyard dog out and letting him chase the AG down the street.
I'm right there with you. I'm so tired of the gloves need to come off when it comes to these laws, and so far they are, it seems, and I'm grateful for that. Let's I think we've exhausted that one at the moment until something new happens.
Pretty much.
What's going on? I have to admit, it was a little disheartening to, right on the heels of having the Ninth Circuit rule as they did on Judge Benitez's injunction, to then have today the Supreme Court decide that the New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York case that we've all been waiting and hoping about was indeed moot, and so they kicked the can down the road, or they essentially sidestepped it, and they're going to look at something else, hopefully. Where does that leave us as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, and whatever cases they have in the queue?
Okay. We're going to use a little bit of legal jargon so that people will understand when they hear it. In a per curiam ruling, which means an unsigned ruling, a majority, 5 judges, the 4 anti-gun and Justice Roberts, the Chief Justice, voted that the case was moot, that New York, in changing its laws, and New York State passing its law that would not allow the city of New York to change their laws back, was sufficient to moot the case, meaning that it unsettled it. In other words, the injury that this case was about was no longer there. So there was nothing to rule on. Now, Justice Kavanaugh, he wrote a concurrence to that and actually voted with the majority, so it was 6-3. And he said that he agrees on the issue of mootness, but said that the issue of using the Heller test of text, history, and tradition is not being used by lower courts. And he is hopeful that another Second Amendment case will be accepted by the Supreme Court in order to deal with that issue. That is music to our ears, okay? And then your 3 judges, Alito, Gorsuch, and Thomas, wrote a dissent. And in the dissent, they said that, no, this thing wasn't moot. The changes in the law didn't resolve all of the issues that were there to be considered on by the plaintiffs. And in fact, they went on in a couple of pages to make a very, very strong argument. So there is obviously very clear sentiment on the part of 4 Supreme Court justices that we need another case on the Second Amendment to be considered. They have docketed, that means files have been opened within the court for over a half a dozen cases, and 6 or 7 of those cases have been taken into conference, which means they're considering them to see if they're going to grant certiorari, which means they're going to grant a hearing on those cases or arguments on those cases, consideration. I don't know how else to describe it, or not. Now, it only takes 4 judges to grant certiorari, but it takes 5 judges to rule one way or the other. So our hope is that of the 6 or 7 cases that they have in conference right now, that they will vote to have one or more of those cases granted as cert, and they have to consider them for trial. Now, their session ends at the end of June, and then it resumes at the beginning of October. They can grant certiorari on cases, and then come in October, that's when they will schedule them for hearing, and then they have up until the end of the following June, 2021, to issue a decision on those cases. That's where we are right now. But we didn't lose on New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York City. The court said that although these issues have been resolved, other issues came up at arguments, including the financial hit that the plaintiffs took because of this case. They didn't argue this in their original case when they brought it to the Supreme Court, but it came up during the arguments, and so the Supreme Court kicked the ball back down to the Second Circuit and said, you guys consider the issue of the financial aspects of it, and Justice Alito, in his dissent, talked about the millions of dollars that have been expended on the parts of the litigants on this thing, in carrying this case forward, and now we're just going to let it go? No, it's going to go to the Second Court of Appeals back there, and depending on how they rule, it could still be appealed back to the Supreme Court, that decision. So remember, I said this isn't going to be easy. It's going to be very hard, especially for us. And when we get the final victory, it's going to be hard fought, and it's going to be rock solid. But this is what we have to go through, and people need to be patient with us as we continue to fight through every step of this process. We're engaged up to our eyeballs in doing this. We've got attorneys looking at this thing every 6 ways but Sunday to figure out how we're going to take our next step. That's, in essence, where we are in a nutshell.
It strikes me that, I need a big one. Yeah, you're not kidding. It strikes me that this really illustrates how important the office of President of the United States is. Because we're talking about 4 justices who spoke out very clearly that they want to hear another Second Amendment case. But we have the Chief Justice, who I have to admit, as far as I know, has been rock solid in the Second Amendment in the few cases he's actually heard and voted on. But is nevertheless, in the back of my mind, he's always that little bit of a wild card. November, we have an election. If slow Joe Biden becomes president, you can guarantee that at that moment, that's when Ginsburg is going to retire. That's when the liberal judges, the old ones, are going to go ahead and go, because they know they're going to be replaced by people who are of similar ilk. On the other hand, if Trump is reelected, that's when Ginsburg is going to try to, they're going to try to keep Ginsburg in there even after she's dead, and prop her up as a skeleton in the corner if they possibly can. But you wonder whether she'll be able to make it physically, even if she hopefully, I'm not wishing her dead by any means, but hopefully she'll have to retire because she's so old she just can't do it anymore. And that gives Trump an opportunity to replace that justice with someone in the vein of a Kavanaugh or a Gorsuch. So it's fascinating to me how vital that election is, and that tells me why there's such a push by anti-gun leftists to do mail-in voting right now so that they can cheat. we have to resist that. We can't allow that to occur across the country, because if we do, we're stuck, because we're going to be stuck with young liberal justices on the Supreme Court and young liberal judges throughout the federal judiciary. And we had the one, obviously you got Hawaii. You're kind of limited on who you can pick to put in there. So he's got the one guy appointed to the Ninth Circuit from Hawaii. He's not that great. But for the most part, the 200 some odd justices that President Trump has appointed have been pretty darn solid so far, as best I can tell. And he's still jamming them through with Mitch McConnell. We got to keep him in office and keep the Senate and all these things coming up in November, which a lot of people aren't paying attention to because of the whole COVID-19 thing. Am I reading this incorrectly, Sam, or am I actually getting it right?
Absolutely spot on. Bullseye again. That is exactly the case. Nothing is more important right now than the re-election of President Donald Trump, because he will have the opportunity, the next president will have the opportunity to appoint probably one for sure, well, probably two, maybe three judges he will have an opportunity to appoint. And we need President Trump, who has committed to appointing judges along the lines of Thomas and Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. The names that are being bandied about are phenomenal adherents of Justice Scalia's originalist position of text, history, and tradition. And so that is so important. Nothing is more important than that. If we have the Supreme Court, we can endure and deal with everything else. But if we have the Supreme Court, we are in very good shape with regards to restoring and then preserving and protecting the Second Amendment. Well,
people forget, critical. I think people forget just how old Justice Thomas is. I mean, at some point or other, that man's going to want to retire as well. He's in his 80s. And, he's going to want to retire
said,
as well.
I wasn't going to do this until I died. I've never had any intention of doing this until I die. So I think that if he were assured that he was going to be replaced by somebody of his ilk, he'd go home. I think that he might retire, and it would be yeah.
But you don't want him replaced by the likes of Biden or whatever other liberal whack job anti-gun nutcase they happen to replace Biden with, because Biden they got hiding in the basement somewhere because he's, I feel bad for the guy, because I think I don't say this to be rude. I really do think he's a dementia patient because he can't remember where he is at. He confuses his wife and his sister. He can't remember what year it is. He can't I think he's a dementia patient, and you don't want to have a dementia patient as president of the United States. That's why they got him locked up in the basement or secured in his house or whatever, and he's not in the public eye unless he can be edited. They're not doing any more live town halls with him virtually. Those blew up in his face.
That's right.
So you wonder if that guy's president, who's actually going to be leading the country. That's a good question. And then do they replace him with somebody else and make somebody else the nominee because he's just not capable? I mean, I don't know. But whoever it might be.
There's a scenario that is going around. Yeah.
Yeah, whoever it might end up being is not going to be positive for us. I can tell you that. Well, so there's one other issue, and that is, I think I have actually a graphic for it, believe it or not, because I'm getting better as I go here. And that is here's a story today. A Virginia shooting range can reopen during pandemic, judge rules. It's not clear whether the order applies statewide. So I'm curious what, if anything, you can tell us about that, because that's another thing that happened, I think, today. So I'm like, come on, this is great.
Sure.
We need about 10 more victories like that.
Yeah, this has been the last 4 days have been action-packed and crazy. So a Virginia judge declared that it was unconstitutional for the government to close down the range that filed a lawsuit saying that they were essential and they needed to be open. And it appears at first blush that it applies only to this gun range. And I don't remember in what community it was. Forgive me for not knowing my geography of
Well, I wish I could help you, but I don't know either, to be honest. So I should have looked at the news story while we had it up there, but we don't, so I can't.
Well, I saw it earlier this morning, and I saw the name of the city, and I forgot. But anyway, nonetheless,
maybe you and I are the dementia patients, and we just don't know it. Yeah. That could be.
Well, the only thing is, you and I shouldn't run for president.
Well, that's true.
That's it.
Yeah, you don't want me running for president anyway. I'd be a disaster. So that's not good. But anyway, you'd be pretty good.
It is a victory. It is a victory.
Yeah.
I talked to our friends at GOA. Evidently, there was a big plan on having a whole bunch of people from all over the state and maybe several states come to the range in order to celebrate the reopening of the range and just tick off the governor and all of the, COVID weenies that are out there crying whatever they're crying.
I love it.
Yeah, So big victory. Nice to end on that victory. It is a victory. Anything that allows law-abiding gun owners to exercise their Second Amendment rights is a victory. But remember, the stumbling blocks that we have run into in the Ninth and in the Supreme Court are just setbacks. They are not defeats. We're still engaged. We're still involved.
So that brings up my last question for you, and I just wrote it down here. This has been an emotional roller coaster over the last few days for a lot of folks, and understandably so. What message would you say to wrap things up here? And I think you just started doing it, but what message would you give gun owners in general, but also I think specifically gun owners in California as we go forward with this fight right now?
In California, it has taken us 20 years of leftist legislation to put us in the situation that we are in now. And in the last couple of weeks, we have been, and we've been fighting all along, filing lawsuits, playing the long ball game, knowing that a lawsuit now will have its fruits maybe years or even a decade later down the road. So we have been doing that, raising money, dedicating it to filing these lawsuits and doing the supportive briefs and all of that. But in reality, it's in 1989 when the dam broke on anti-gun laws here in the state of California. And since then, we've got all the laws, Chuck Michel's book that's this thick, California gun laws, a guide to state and federal gun regulations. It's taken us that long to get there. We want to win in one fell swoop. That is unrealistic. Come on. We're working hard knowing that we're going to take our rights back in chunks at a time. And we're close to doing that. And every time we get close to victory, you can bet your sweet bippy that the antis are going to marshal everything they can possibly do to thwart us. And that's what they did in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus the city of New York. They did something that they wouldn't do for anything else in the world, knowing that a victory for us would have had national implications. They changed their law, and then they forced the state of New York to pass a law that would not allow the city of New York to change their law back, just so that they can get it before the Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court said, hey, when you were challenging the request on certiorari, you were saying that your laws were all constitutional, that everything was fine, that you had done nothing wrong. And then when we accepted the case, you changed your tune and said, oh, yeah, no, we've got to change the laws in order to remove the injury on the part of the plaintiffs so that there would be no case. And they succeeded in doing that. So like liberals do, they will speak on both sides of the issue. In other words, lie if it will help them. Lie is an ethic to them. If it helps them to achieve their ultimate goal, they have no problem with lying. And that's exactly what they did with this case. And that's what ticked off Justice Alito when he wrote his dissent on this thing. So bottom line is this. We are making great strides and great progress. We will continue to do so in the months and few years to come. But we need you to stay involved and do not get depressed, because depression leads to distractions. We need to stay focused. We need to stay informed. And you know what we need to do is we need to figure out how to get in contact with the millions of new gun owners that are amongst us. All of your neighbors who have always said, I'm never going to own a gun, who have gone out and bought a gun, and you find out about it, bring them into the fold. Welcome them. Tell them that you will help them, in doing safety training or how to clean and disassemble and reassemble their guns, or take them to the range and do a little bit of shooting with them, show them the community that exists, the amount of safety that exists, and give them the confidence. Because once somebody is confident about their Second Amendment rights and they exercise them, they tend to want to keep them. And during election time, we will have to remind them of who it was that was trying to deny them of those rights.
Sam, you went away again. There you go.
That was just a call interrupted.
That's okay. That's okay. Well,
that's what we have to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we say it all the time. It's going to be a long battle. And we had I think Rick Travis the other day said, well, we got a touchdown, but we still have a game to play. So we did. We got a touchdown. Now they've gotten a touchdown. Now we're going to go back and see if we get a touchdown. Maybe we can score an extra point. The game is not over until it's over. So we have to keep fighting. I think the thing I would say is this: we have to keep supporting organizations like Gun Owners of California, even when times are difficult, frankly, especially when times are difficult. I'll have people contact me and go, well, now that we won a case, I'm going to join GOA. Or now that we won a case, I'm going to join GOC. Or now that we won a case, I'm going to... Well, you might want to join so that we can win a case, not because we won one. So the case is still ongoing. I think that's the most encouraging thing, is it's still sitting with Judge Benitez, and what the bandying back and forth with the Ninth was just about the injunction, not about the case itself. That's very encouraging. And the fact that the Supreme Court has a number of cases standing in the wings that they can look at. And as Sam said, it takes 4 justices to choose a case, and we already know we have 4 that really want to hear one. And hopefully Alito will be true to what he's been in the past, not Alito, Roberts will be true to what he has done in the past and stand with us on the Second Amendment. He's been pretty strong where that's concerned.
Yes.
One step at a time, brother. Back in the fight we go. When you thought you had a reprieve, you're back in the battle again. Well, Sam, thank you very much for taking the time to jump on here last minute with me. I really do appreciate it. You've cleared up a lot of great stuff. And I do ask you, if you are watching this and you're not a member of Gun Owners of California, please join. I'll make sure that there's a link in the description. Sam, have a great day, and please stay safe, okay?
Joel, you too. God bless you. Stay safe, man. We need you very badly in this fight. So
I will keep doing it. As long as my wife keeps feeding me, I'll be fine. All right, man. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for staying with us through this whole thing. I really do appreciate it. I know that Chuck Michelle is wanting to come on the show here in the next few days, and I'm sure something will happen between now and then that we'll need to clear up. I've also got some actual gun videos for you that I'm going to post over the next few days as well, so hopefully we'll have a little bit of that in lieu of all these news things I've been doing lately. Thank you very much for all of your support. Thank you very much for sticking with me through these long slog videos. Wherever you go, whatever you do, please be safe.